As a professional involved in electricity delivery, the T&D World podcast and tdworld.com is your definitive source for breaking news, industry updates, and more. We've got you covered from transmission to distribution and everything that affects the power grid. And now, on to today's episode.
Welcome to the T&D World Live podcast today. I'm Nikki Chandler. I'm editorial director. And today we are excited to have the VP of Content for the Water and Energy Group for Endeavor Business Media, Bob Crossen. Bob recently took on this role to lead the content for our brands such as T&D World, Energy Tech, Oil and Gas Journal, and Water World, just to name a few of those. And the reason we asked him to be on today, besides introducing him to you, is to discuss his recent trip to the ADIPEC event in Dubai. So if you're not familiar, like me, I wasn't really that familiar with the event. ADIPEC stands for Abu Dhabi International Petroleum Exhibition and Conference. So I had, of course, always thought of this event as an oil and gas show, but everyone is talking about power right now. And that's for several reasons. And so we're getting a lot of interesting conversations, basically really on the fringes of our industry and outside of our industry. And so it seems that they definitely covered power, electricity, and of course, energy at this show, as well as the technology and issues that are definitely applicable to the industries covered in our entire group. So before we get started, I'm talking about your experiences and thoughts, Bob. Would you mind giving us a little bit about your background and what you're excited about and working with our editors and industries since you're pretty new to this role?
Yes, yeah, certainly. Well, and thank you for having me and talking to me about this. The ADIPEC this is my first time that I went to it, so I have a couple thoughts of it, especially coming from a different market. So I guess getting into that a little bit, I've been covering the municipal water and wastewater industry for about almost 10 years now in a B2B context. So in the same way that Nikki has been covering this power market for as long as she has, I'm kind of the same thing on the water side of things. So I'm coming in into this role kind of with that perspective in mind, and obviously the content strategy elements of it too. But
Hmm.
the what excites me about the energy side of things is that it is a new market for me to explore and learn about. And one of the things that I have always loved about the water industry is that there's no matter how, like, the more you uncover, the more you don't know. And I get the sense that the same thing happens with this energy industry, whether it's a technical thing or some curious solutions that people are able to put forth to solve some energy problems or what have you. That the more you uncover with each of these industries, the more you start to fall more and more in love with them. Because I have a deep love now for the water industry, having covered it for so long, and I'm excited about the prospect of having that type of relationship with the energy industry as well.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I feel like we never really have I guess I never feel like we have actually covered all of this industry.
Yeah,
And
right?
and there are some topics that we'll cover that may seem basic to some people, but it's just like, well, there are new people coming into the industry, or there are people that
Mhm,
are not only young people, but people that get switch industries and so
mhm.
and that's the good thing about our brands and T&D World is we cover everything from basics to even the more technical side and the higher level stuff.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
Time moves down, it moves for whatever it moves forward, it moves in whatever direction we experience it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
um
So yeah.
and so progress does too. So, like, as things progress, you start to see new developments of things, and that's what keeps these industries really interesting, is that there's enhancements, there's continuous improvement, there's new thoughts, there's new capacities. Obviously we'll be talking about AI a little bit today because that's been such a big keyword this year, particularly in the energy market. But anyway, I just, it is interesting that there's a lot that's different between the industries, but there's also a lot that's the same.
Yeah. So and we're learning that in our group because we did really just join with oil and gas within the last couple years, and then water has come on board with us. So we're learning about how we cross over, and then of course the cool thing about waters is you guys are utilities too. It's just a different part of it.
Hmm.
So let's get to ADIPEC in Dubai. Um, No, it's a long trip, but
Yeah, very long trip.
yeah. Um, what was your overall impression walking into ADIPEC for the first time? And like I said, I've never been there, and I'm sure a few of our audience members haven't either, just being more utilities. Although we may be going next year, but especially coming from your background in water and wastewater industries.
Mhm. Yeah, well, first of all, it's just enormous. It's huge. I think there were 18 exhibit halls, like thousands of
Wow.
exhibitors, and many more thousands attendees. I think they estimated around 200,000 people were there over the course of the 4-day conference. So it's not like each day there was 200,000 people there, but I'd estimate probably 80 to 100,000 people on average each day of the show. So it was just big, like huge, a sea of people. I called it a zoo, a maze. It's that I think that was the first impression. And then I think maybe the second impression was just how despite the size in that regard, it was really, pardon the pun, well oiled. So, um, the like even just going through like getting into the conference each day, it took me no more than maybe like 5 minutes. And you'd think for a show that is as big as it is that there would be like lines and bottlenecks and all that, and I didn't experience that at all. And I thought that that was like really fascinating. But that's maybe more an events marketing thing than anything else, but really was the size. I think that really is what captured me the most is like there's just so much there. And that in the water and wastewater market, a lot of the shows that I've attended, like there maybe like the biggest ones are 15 to 20,000 people here in the United States. There's Aquatech Amsterdam in Europe every other
Mm.
year, and that's maybe closer to the 60 to 80,000 people. And then there's EFOT on the off years for that show. And that show is very big, more probably around this size of ADIPEC. But I've never been to that one. I've been to Aquatech and it was really huge. But the big thing that I think all water organizations or water association shows that I've been to, they're very focused on like the educational platform. Like, the
Mhm.
educational platform has as big a footprint as the exhibit halls do, if not a bigger footprint than
Yeah.
they do on the exhibit hall, and that it was kinda inverted in that regard with Adipec, so that it was way more exhibit hall heavy. There was
Mm.
still educational sessions, but that footprint was a lot smaller than the exhibit halls were, so I think that was the other key thing they kinda took away from it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's interesting. So definitely focused on maybe, would you say more the technology and the
Oh, yeah.
services and things like that? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
and doing business in booths. A lot of these
mm,
booths were like double deckers, and the
yeah.
upper floor would be like a couple of different meeting rooms. And so they would have actual
Mm.
business meetings and sign business agreements in their booths. So a lot of like business actually happened on the show floor as well, which is I'm certain happens a lot in the water and wastewater market as well, but it's a little bit different. Like they don't have booths like that. We don't have double decker booths really in the water market at all. We always have single floor ones. So I think it's just approached differently. They might have a conference room on that single floor, and they might not, and they may sign papers, and they may not, but maybe they find some other place to do that kind of business work.
Yeah, I mean, some of the bigger utility shows on the electrical side have some double decker big booths,
Hmm.
and some of like with IEEE T&D, they bring in the big equipment, which is really cool. But
Hmm.
yeah, the kind of the doing business on the floor, I'm not sure that gets done as much either with our industry. It's more, hey, let's change contacts and we'll connect
Hmm.
later, or that night or something like that. So that is interesting. They get stuff done.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's marketing
so
in 2 ways, right? They wanna
yeah.
market to the press that's there and get their story out and to the attendees who may purchase, but they also wanna market to their business partners, right? So, they're
Hmm.
kinda doing double duty there.
Yeah. So that what about, I mean, you did talk a little bit about your experience and how that compares to water sector events, but what about in the industries? Just kind of an overview. What are some of those kind of higher level similarities or differences between
Mhm,
even the oil and gas and water? And if I know you're kind of just learning about electricity, but yeah, what are some
mhm.
of those?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, obviously the technical side of things are quite different from one another. Obviously, terminology because of those technical differences. There's that too. Like the language around the event is very different. Um, But and there are a lot of different technologies that I saw at ADIPEC that I would never see at a water show, and similarly at a water show, there's technologies there I'd never see at ADIPEC or an energy conference. But there's also a lot of bleed over technologies. A lot of
Mhm.
these systems still use pumps, especially for like water cooling of things. They're still using blowers for air cooling. There's still generators. A lot of those things just are cross market. They touch on everything. So there were some technologies that were very different, and then other technologies that I had seen before, and I'd seen them in one context and now saw them in a new one. And similarly, the trends are very similar. It's I in the water market, the concept of smart water has been a thing for almost my entire career in
Mhm.
that particular market, and obviously it's dovetailing quite well with all the AI and machine learning and smart systems, how you're managing data, how that's operationalizing things differently, and all those same things seem to be happening in the power market, in the power market and in the oil and gas market, because for regardless of which one of these markets you're in, if you can find efficiencies or optimizations with these new data tools and you can make better or quicker or more effective decisions, it ultimately helps the bottom line. And at the end of the day, we're in business to business media. So they're running businesses and need to make their bottom line a little bit easier to manage. So there was a lot that was very different, but there's also just a lot that was very the same. And I think by the end of Adipec, I had a pretty good firm grasp on how those conversations were very similar, but had their own unique twists to them, depending on the market that we were talking about.
Yeah, so it did sound like some of those business trends and technology are really aligned.
Hmm.
What about like workforce,
Oh, for sure.
capacity? I know you did talk about technology, but kind of those are other two
Hmm.
words that,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Workforce was brought up quite a bit. I think when you talk about AI, it's almost impossible to ignore the workforce side of that equation. And workforce, obviously, I mean, coming from the water world, workforce has been a big issue and a challenge for us for quite some time now. And as I'm talked to more editors, not just in our group, but in some of the other groups that endeavor B2B, I've come to realize that this isn't a market specific issue. This is like a global issue. It's more universal, really.
Hmm.
That finding qualified people for these technical positions is becoming harder and harder to find. Um, and I'm sure we could have a whole podcast talking just about that. But the workforce problem was still palpable. I get the sense that there is still that same problem of, there's folks who have 40, 50 years of experience and legacy knowledge in their brains, and they're looking to retire. And what does that mean for the organization that they are leaving? Who steps into those shoes? Is it going to be someone in their 40s, 50s? Are they going to be in their 30s because you're not sure you can find someone with similar skill sets? I'm not sure. And I think that it was a big question, and I think it will remain a big question for a while. And to maybe further hammer down this point, we do a state of the industry survey for our water and wastewater brands every year, and I just got our data back about a week or so ago. And for the past, I'd say 3 years, we've seen that the percentage of people who indicate that they were 70 years old or older in the wastewater market was about 10% or more, which is a lot for the respondents of this survey. And I didn't think that it was truly reflective of the market as a whole, but this year that number was 0%.
Mm.
And again, it may not be reflective of the entire market, but that suggests to me that like maybe these people who were 50 years in the industry, 40 years in the industry are truly retiring now. And what does that mean for the future of these markets and these technical skills that all these people have built up? So anyway, that's kind of a big tangent on the workforce thing, but definitely was a big question. And we're seeing it in the water industry. I'm expecting that we'll see similar trends happening in these other industries as well, just a matter of kind of when that as they called it, the silver tsunami, when the silver tsunami actually crashes on land.
Well, and I'll tell you what maybe that answer is to that workforce shortage is AI, which is going to bring me
Hmm.
into my next question about you, or for you is a couple weeks ago I went to an industrial AI event, and they really kind of touted AI as kind of the answer to skilled labor shortage.
Mhm.
Whether that's a good or bad thing, I don't know. But it may be coming along at the right time. I mean, I guess you could debate the merits of AI all day, but
Mhm.
so I do know that at ADIPEC, they did discuss AI and autonomy, I think you'd mentioned. So
Mhm.
I kind of wanted to get into that perspective. What perspectives did you hear about kind of the move from automation toward autonomous operations? And maybe if you could kind of
Mhm.
explain what that means, but especially in these high risk environments that are common all across our industries.
Mhm.
I mean, I know offshore, definitely on the oil and gas side, but we definitely have those high risk environments in the electric
Mhm.
utility industry as well.
Yeah, there seems to be this dream of autonomy. That was kind of the
Hmm.
way that it was phrased to me, or it was either phrased to me or kind of like implied that like that's kind of the dream of where to go, and that AI
Hmm.
is getting us in a direction that allows that to be achievable finally, or at least the AI tools that we have today are putting us on the correct path to achieve that. I guess is maybe a better way to put it.
Okay.
So I think the first thing is really just understanding that there's a lot of different AI out there, right? You have your LLMs like your ChatGPT and stuff like that. You have AIs that can understand and parse through a bunch of data. You have AIs that are using that data to can make decisions and things like that. So not all AI is the same, I think is the
Hmm.
first thing. And the big thing here, I think kind of the bridging point between the AI we have now and the AI of the future, or the autonomy of the future. That is to say, going from like this pump will do this action for this set period of time and this outcome will happen, right? Like that's kind of the autonomous side of things, is it's running without human interference, and really human interference comes into play when things have gone wrong or an adjustment needs to be made to accommodate new capacity or growth or whatever. There it could be any number of reasons, right? So the automation is just like all those processes working in tandem and in harmony with one another to create the positive outcome that a utility is looking to do. In an autonomous world, it will do all of those things, find those problems, and solve those problems on its own, right?
Hmm.
So the human intervention is less important and less critical to the long-term strategy there. Of course, the other element of the autonomy thing is when robotics gets involved, and that's more about where we're talking about like those high danger environments of
Yeah.
developing robots that can do things like a lot of this show. A big portion of that with this show was offshore oil rigs, um, and just it's a very harsh, high risk environment. You're out in the elements. It's deep water. So like it's very hazardous to human health. Like it's very dangerous. Some things can happen and people can go missing in the blink of an eye.
Hmm.
And so I think part of the dream there is that like we can lessen the human tragedy of offshore drilling if we can get some more robotic things in there. We can reduce the amount of time that humans have to spend on platforms if things can be more autonomous with robotics or with just operational elements in their own right. So I think that was kind of the high danger side, and obviously that's this offshore context, and maybe you can fill in some of the blanks for me of like how could that work in a power context. I mean, transformers can blow, right? So is there an opportunity for robotics in that respect? I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Because I was kind of curious after I would tell you that story, if you had some thoughts on how this robotics side of the autonomy equation would impact power.
Yeah, I mean, for the operations of power, definitely there's some applications in substations and areas where there's live live wire, things like
Yeah.
that. Um, I'm a little hesitant to say how far it would go because, of course, we a big part of our audience are linemen, and
Hmm.
they really that's a very serious, crucial job. And so I do think they might integrate some to help with the
Hmm.
safety. Um, but I mean, I'm not sure how much. Maybe at some point there might be, like I said, integration of robotics in line work.
Hmm.
Maybe more so, though. I see it a lot more in the manufacturing side, so that's not necessarily what we
Hmm.
get into as much. But definitely those, there's some pretty dangerous areas that we could really use. some of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what I found really interesting about those conversations on the autonomy side of things is that, for I feel like when all this AI stuff was really coming about a year or so ago, a lot of the marketing and everything was like, we're not replacing human jobs, we're not replacing human
Hmm.
jobs. And now that they're talking about autonomy, there is this shift in that narrative a little bit of like, well, maybe we will, but it's going to be in these contexts so that you don't have to be the one in this really dangerous situation. And maybe you are moving that robot around. So your
Yeah.
job is still intact, but it's just in a different capacity. But that's kind of what I found really interesting about my conversations there is that, um, with a workforce shortage, it sounds to me like there are jobs that need to be replaced with
Yeah.
AI.
Well, right.
And
Yeah.
that I think that's kind of maybe the real crux of the question is how many of those could and how many couldn't. And I know that was another thing that we wanted to talk about. So I won't go into too much detail on that now, but because I had a couple more things I wanted to talk about with the autonomy side of things.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
I talked to ABB and to Schneider and several other organizations at the show, but my conversations with ABB and Schneider, I think, were maybe the most illuminating in some respects to like kind of the direction things are going. So first, I wanted to talk about agentic AI. So that is
Hmm.
to say, an AI that's an agent. It does like one thing. It's like you could have an agentic AI that just cares about the operational capacity of things, or you can have an agentic AI that only cares about the speed of pumps or whatever, and you can ask that particular agent for information to give you like to make a decision point easier for you to manage. But when I talked to ABB, Gino Hernandez there, he mentioned that there is a big challenge. He said, quote, the big challenge that you have is you have these systems that really, when you link them together, they enable you to move more and more towards autonomy, but they weren't designed to be linked together. And that's where he said that this agentic AI comes into play, is that there's all these disparate systems. You have all these different service providers, all these different equipment manufacturers, all these different PLCs and human machine interfaces and everything. And they don't always not always were they designed to talk to each other. And agentic AI allows for that to happen because it can read the data from those different things, or the agents themselves can read the data and then talk to each other to determine some interesting outcomes that a human would never really realize unless they were like that specifically focused on just the pumps and that specifically focused on just the generators or whatever. So I thought that was really really interesting. That this agentic AI idea is not just about uh, making jobs easier, but it's also about linking systems together that historically have never really been able to be linked together.
Yeah, and I did see kind of a demo of that at the Industrial X Unleashed. IFS had put that together a couple weeks ago, and that's the event that I went to. And I learned a ton on kind of the different types of AI there. So it was very
Hmm.
educational. But we did see a demonstration of agentic AI and how that could work in a manufacturing setting. So it was really cool as far as
Hmm.
from maintaining equipment, calling for repair, and it's just there. It really is, if you could think of it and it can be done, I mean, like I'd say, I guess to put it this way, if you can think of it, it probably can be done. So
Yeah, yeah,
it's really, so it was really interesting. So I agree with you. That's an
yeah.
interesting concept.
Yeah, it's similarly, there's Bjart Peterson from ABB when he was in the
Uh-huh.
same conversation with Gino. He talked about how it kind of like it allows you to fix problems and bridge gaps. So he said, quote, when you are using AI to analyze the condition of the system, when the operator sees some abnormal situations, maybe they don't know exactly what to do. So
Hmm.
it can be like what to do maintenance wise to fix what the problem is, but maybe they don't know exactly what is important, but the AI is helping them to analyze and find the rules of the situation. You can only see the surface, end quote. So that's to say that like maybe these agentic AIs can, especially in a context where what I was talking about earlier, someone with 40 or 50 years of experience has left the organization. They're taking all this legacy knowledge with them. Maybe this agentic AI will allow for that will step into that role and allow these newer operators without that much experience to see the experience and understand what to do. And it for the first time human history, it sounds like we have a technology that might be bridging that a legacy knowledge gap where we lose knowledge as generations pass away. And I think that that's a really fascinating theory and concept around these AI tools and agentic AI, because it does solve a problem that I think we've been talking about forever in the workforce side of the equation for our industries. So,
Oh, I know, and I have a ton of questions. I mean, I could talk to you about this all day as far as, how does that change education? There's just
oh
so
yeah.
much to it that we could probably get into maybe on a different podcast. But kind of going, we're kind of aligning with what happened at the conference. So, did you hear then more about kind of how that human expertise
hmm
works with that? And you kind of mentioned bridging the legacy knowledge, but kind of what does that look like in the future as far as how humans and their expertise will work with
Yeah.
AI and robotics?
Yeah, so I'll lean on my conversation from Schneider Electric with Devin Pillay, and he
Okay.
said that really for these new AI tools to succeed, he said there's three things that need to be there: ambition, readiness, and human capacity.
Mm,
That is to say, the human capacity portion is really more of what you're asking about. That there's only he said that there's only so much that the technology can do, and the change process to autonomy has to come with the change management philosophy around the interface and interplay between humans and machines. So he's saying this is a bigger problem to solve. This isn't just this isn't just like this technology works in this context. Is how we need to integrate how humans are going to integrate with machines and the AI and technology. Like those need to be in harmony with one another.
hmm
And he had this great like analogy where he's like, think about it with the autonomous car, right? If you sit behind the wheel of an autonomous car, you need to have trust that it is going to go take you where you want to go and not drive you off a cliff, right?
Yeah,
Um, and I think that that's kind of what he was trying to get at with this human capacity thing is it requires a lot of trust on the part of the humans, and we're not quite at the degree of trust there
good point.
with these tools to trust them to do these types of things. Yeah, that's our moonshot. That's where autonomy is. That's why it's a dream, right? That's why they use that term, this idea of a dream, is that we're not quite at the level that that can be fully achieved yet. It's just the direction that we're headed. Um, so I thought that's maybe the best way to kind of like talk about that, because the other thing I did ask when I was in some of these meetings where you're talking about this legacy knowledge stuff. I'm like, well, how does this impact education? To your point,
Okay.
how
Yeah.
does this impact the knowledge? In 50 years from now, if let's say like 50 years from now, you've got someone who's in Gen Alpha or like an even younger generation than whatever's coming after Gen Alpha. Let's say that they're in this position at this utility and they need to answer a question. How much of their knowledge is comes about through leveraging agentic AI, and how much of it comes from innate knowledge and study, like it has historically, and what happens when the AI breaks? And I kind of had posed this question to a lot of folks that were at the show, and I think a lot of them were like, "We don't really know an answer to that." Like they didn't really have an answer to that particular question. I think it's too future forward and too far down the pipeline that they're not quite sure what it means, because it requires thinking outside of the market that you're in. It requires thinking about the societal implications and the systems of government and education that are informing how our industries operate. So I think it's a much bigger question than just the energy market for sure. But I think it's a really valid question, and I have a lot of I guess I have a little bit of worry, maybe a lot of worry about what that means for the long term future of these
Yeah.
industries.
Yeah, and I did talk to I believe he was senior vice president of technology or something like that at IFS, and I asked him similar question, and he said, "Well, um, we have calculators, right? But we still learn how the calculators work before we
hmm
start using them. So we really can't take away that part of the education."
hmm
Because I was asking him, like, yeah, I saw this demo of this AI. I could just go in and do that for you now, right? That's what it looked like.
hmm
But no, you can't. You're
Yeah.
going to have to learn how it works and why it works and what it's doing. Or he said, we may end up with a society of like that movie Idiocracy.
Yeah.
Have you seen that? Yeah. He's
Yeah.
like, no, we can't, we can't just get rid of education. So, and that was kind of an extreme, but that was kind of what our conversation was. So it is really interesting. But it might definitely change how colleges are, what the colleges are
Mhm.
teaching, how they're teaching it, whether or not we have to spend, $100,000 for our kids to go to college. Maybe they'll
Mhm.
just be more specialized quicker or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, there's it's really hard to postulate, but I
Yeah.
think that asking the questions now is still really valuable.
Hmm.
The one I wanted to add one last thing for this question because Schneider again, this is Devin. He said, "quote Ultimately, you want to get to a point where automation starts to not only provide prompts, but starts to self-diagnose and self-heal." End quote. So that's kind of getting at that whole idea of what autonomy is, right? It's the idea of like self-diagnosing and self-healing and doing things without without needing intervention every single time. Um, but he did note kind of later on in that conversation that that still doesn't come at the expense of human intervention. Like a human might like the AI may find something and then trigger an alarm, and the human intervention then is like, all right, do we need to delay things? Do we need to make a decision here? So there are still decision points that humans will need to make, even in an agentic AI future. And that I think I found that to be quite interesting. That like it's kind of finding the balance between when the AI should self-diagnose, self-heal, handle things on its own, and when should humans be brought into that equation. And if you think, the more I think about it, the more it comes down to like almost being like, how much autonomy do you as a supervisor give to your direct report, right? Like that's kind of the same question that's being asked here. It's just that we don't have the trust in these systems quite yet because they're not as advanced as like a human direct report would be right now. So I think that that's maybe that's the better way to frame it, is like, how do you approach it in that respect? If you treat it like an employee, um, how does that change your mindset on it?
Yeah. The trust is kind of, I kind of like that part of the conversation because that's so true. I mean, I actually am not ready to get into a Waymo, but some people
That's
are,
fair.
yeah. So maybe I will be. So, well, let's shift a little bit before we kind of wrap up here, which is a big topic for our audience and then other energy tech audience as well as some of our other brands. But so, what did you learn about how the energy sector there is thinking about the energy transition um,
Mhm,
versus maybe energy addition, like adding capacity? So, um, and that involves not only the sustainability and decarbonization, if those really fit into the conversations this year or not, because know
mhm,
that there's been a little less of that recently in utilities, but also then meeting that demand, are they looking at, and I know they are, how we're going to meet the demand for
mhm,
electricity and operations, even all
mhm.
across all the industries.
Yeah. So when I started the role with the energy group, I did hear the term energy transition a lot.
Hmm.
And so I did have to like look into it and understand kind of what that meant. And correct me if I'm wrong, but here I'll give a quick definition of what I'm believe the energy transition to be. That is the idea that if you were to look at energy as if it were like a pie chart, that the slices on the pie are shifting around to make a more diversified portfolio of energy, and maybe there's new slices that are added over time as well as emerging technologies come about. But that's kind of what the transition is. It's like, how much of the pie should be oil and gas versus power or nuclear or hydrogen or what have you. That was kind of my understanding of the energy transition terminology. Is that your understanding of it as well?
Yeah, but it's kind of funny because there could be a debate about that too, as well, because there are certain people that might the energy transition is should be all renewables, right? But
Oh, okay.
I like your definition, and it's probably becoming more reality, that it's
Mhm.
more that transitioning that mix as
Mhm.
far as how we're going to meet demand and be secure and reliable and sustainable.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Oh, and I didn't mention them, but like I didn't mention them, but obviously, like wind and solar would be part of that
yeah,
pie still,
yeah.
right? Like those are slices that get added in, and like how much percent should they take up compared to these other monoliths of energy over the years, and so I was really. It's like, I'm going into ADIPEC and I'm kind of like keeping this term in mind, and this idea of the what the shape of energy will look like in the future.
Hmm.
And in the opening ceremony, the CEO of ADNEC, the Abu Dhabi National, um, or ADNOC, sorry, the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, had said, he's like, it's not an energy transition, it's an energy addition,
Okay.
meaning that the demand for energy is getting so high, particularly driven by, as everyone's talking, data centers and big tech are kind of driving this need for energy capacity to a degree that we haven't seen in a really long time. And the that he brought that up as the driver and noted, like, we have to add to the energy portfolio. We can't just solve the energy portfolio by shifting the puzzle pieces around. That's not enough,
Mm.
essentially. It was kind of the message that I got
That's
from that.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like thinking back to that pie analogy, the thought that I had was like, all right, so the pie needs to go from, being a certain size, let's say visually, if you're watching this big, maybe about the size of my face, and it needs to maybe double in size, and the pie slices have to change in shape, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So that's kind of the way that I was visualizing it in my head, of like, it's not one or the other. Both need to happen kind of in congruence with each other. And what that shape looks like will be very different in, 5, 10, 20 years from now.
Yeah. What about nuclear before we kind of wrap up? What do
Yeah,
they say about that? Because that's
well,
kind of the big
that was
topic.
the other thing I was going to
Yeah.
touch on, was the
Yeah.
nuclear side, because I've not been very tapped into the energy market until I got into this role, but I got the impression that nuclear was gaining some traction, maybe more broadly in a global sense for a little bit here, particularly because of the challenges of surrounding oil, and some international conflicts that are creating the challenge of getting oil to certain countries. And so with again, the ADNOC CEO, when he was speaking, or prior to the ADNOC CEO speaking, they had some questions at the opening ceremony that they asked of the audience, and people use their phone to do live polling. And one of those was, what does the current pie of energy look like, right? And so they had like this whole shape and everything, and nuclear on there was like, I don't know, 15, maybe 16% or something like that, was like the shape of what they assumed everything was. And then when they're like, all right, well, what does it look like, several years from now? And the nuclear became like almost a quarter of the chart, which was
Hmm.
way more than I heard these rumblings and stuff, and I figured the nuclear was attractive. I didn't really think that it was going to be that attractive,
Yeah.
to everyone. I was pretty surprised by that being such a big component of that survey question.
Well, definitely, we've been really following it in our industry for electric utilities because that's going to, we all, we need to look at how we're going to get the power to deliver it. Um, and then on the energy tech side, as far as, some of the nuclear facilities being kept open or,
Mhm.
reopened, or, and then of course looking at the small modular nuclear reactors as being an option too. But yeah, it's kind of funny because it's almost becoming a bipartisan. If you apply a partisanship to each type of generation, which I think is funny,
Mhm.
nuclear is almost becoming more of a bipartisan fuel. So it's kind of
Yeah, yeah,
interesting. But
yeah.
but anyway,
What's
yeah,
old is
that's
becoming new again.
yeah, exactly. And it's just kind of interesting to see how different people favor the different
Mhm.
generation, but also, there's money in it too, so you kind of see
For
where
sure.
that's all coming from. But well, Bob, I don't really have much else. I do thank you very much for bringing us along on your ADIPEC journey, and sharing your insights on kind of
Of
bridging
course.
these industries. These are all very essential industries. And I'm glad to be part of this group because, yes, these are definitely the most important. And then I thank the audience for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow, share, or reach out with your own thoughts on this. And so that's it. Until next time, thanks so much.
Thanks again for listening to today's podcast, produced by Endeavor Business Media, a division of Endeavor B2B. To hear the latest information for power delivery professionals and industry best practices, subscribe to T&D World Podcast and visit our website, tdworld.com, where you can find insightful articles and sign up for our free daily newsletter.